Yes. So students, now we have to look through all the different sectors, how they contributed positively or negatively to the colonial rule. Now we are starting with the agricultural sector. Agricultural sector was the most dominant sector of that time, or you can say now itself also it is a dominant sector of the Indian economy. That is, it has provided about 85% of the country's population its livelihood. So despite being occupation of the large population, the agricultural sector productivity remained same, remained stagnant. You can say because of all the what is it old technique of production, that is no irrigation facilities was available. We were using very low technological equipments. So all these things contributed. Although 85% of the people were working under the agricultural sector, you have to say that it never provided a very good what you can say a very positive amount a positive amount of development in that sector. So agricultural productivity was very low. So productivity means it is the product that is generated out per input. Okay, so productivity was very low in the agricultural sector, and also the area under cultivation was also stagnant, or you can say it was very less. So people or the farmers were getting a small piece of land here and there, so they cannot actually do very good amount of cultivation. And also, at that particular period of time, zamindari system was there. So whatever they produce, they have to surrender it under their zamindars. Okay, so the land was provided by zamindars to them. So whatever they produce, they have to surrender under their zamindars. So they actually get a very mere income from cultivation. So that is the reason what agricultural sector showed a very stagnant type of development. So it was zamindari system. So you can say it was land settlement, or you can say land reforms were made after independence, which were contributing a very good amount of development, or you can say very good development in the agricultural sector. But at this time, zamindars and also one more important thing was the zamindars what you can say changed the consumer crops from cash crops. So they didn't had enough of consumer crops to consume for themselves. Actually, they changed the cultivation pattern to more cash crops because of commercialization of agriculture. Commercialization of agriculture means we are changing the consumer crops to cash crops or capital crops. You can say commercial crops. So these, what you can say, if farmers are making more of cash crops or commercial crops like cashews, then you can say coffee, then you can say spices. All such things are commercial crops. So zamindars, it is not actually the farmers getting the benefits out of that. It is the zamindars getting the benefits out of that. So more of commercial crops means more earning for the zamindars. Right. So ultimately it is getting affected by the farmers because they don't have enough to consume for themselves. It is not consumer goods, they are consumer crops they are producing, but they are producing the commercial crops. So these were the two reasons which contributed to the stagnant development in the agricultural sector. One was because of the zamindar system, a very strict zamindar system whereby the farmers have to surrender their produces frequently to their zamindars. And also the land holding were very small. So because they have to what you can say, the lands were fragmented, you can say. So it has resulted in a very bad situation for the farmers. So and the second reason was for the commercialization of agriculture. The crops were turned to commercial crops or cash crops instead of consumer crops. So these had all, what you can say, we were exporting cash crops more other than the consumer crops. So all these benefited zamindars but not the farmers. So this is the agricultural sector. And you have industrial sector now. Industrial sector, it is actually, we had handicrafts industries, silk industries, cotton industries. All these industries were famous. But at a particular point of time, even though they were famous, they couldn't perform well. So they were moved to a stagnant situation. Okay. So see, here India could not develop a sound industrial base under the colonial rule. That is because we couldn't have a better agriculture, that is the raw material. Our raw materials were supplied to other countries as cheaper raw materials. So we couldn't get use of all these resources. So we couldn't have a very sound industrial base in our country during colonial rule. So the primary motive of the colonial government behind this policy was, it was a twofold policy. So the first one was to reduce India to the status of mere exporter for the raw materials, and the second was to turn India into a sprawling market for finished products of those industries. Yes, the same thing which we have discussed in the first thing. First one, or the under colonial rule, those colonial government aimed twofold, twofold development. That is to make India into a mere supplier of the raw materials that to cheaply, and also to make India a demand country for all the finished products of Britain. Okay, so all these two things were the very main motive of the colonial government. So that is why we couldn't have a very sound base in the industrial sector. Then comes the handicraft industry. Also, our handicraft industry also created a very stagnant situation, and also that created a very massive unemployment, and also it was the raw materials were locally supplied. So that is why it has also affected those industries very negatively. So next, during the second half of the 19th century, modern industries began to take root in India, but they also remained very slow in the progress. So by 19th century as well as 20th century, so that time it was the introduction of TISCO, that is Tata Iron and Steel Company, which was incorporated in 1907. Cement, sugar, paper, all such industries came after in India after the Second World War, that is after 1919. Then comes the capital good industry. That is, capital good industry means which produce machine tools, etc. So we were actually producing, or we were turning our handicraft, silk, cotton, that trend to capital good industries. That is, we were more of looking through the capital goods, that is plants, machineries, all such things, tools, etc. So our handicrafts, and even though our industries were growing, we couldn't, or the industrial sector couldn't give much importance or much development to the GDP or to India. So that also contributed India into a stagnant situation. So GDP, that is gross domestic product, that is the total value of all goods and services produced in a country during 1 year. Okay, so that also, when we calculated, or we had only a vague idea of all such things, but instead, even though we calculated GDP, the industrial sector remained stagnant in all these eras. Okay, they couldn't have a very sound base in the Indian economy development. So this is the industrial sector of India. Now we have to discuss through the foreign trade.